could anyone bring this data together in a transparent, at scale, allow it to serve multiple use cases within the organization? And what I saw was no one was doing this. If I could connect data at scale and then use this connected view of data and push it into AI, surely you will make better decisions, but better efficiencies on those decisions than doing it in isolation. So I resigned from the firm. It was a big moment.
What did your dad say? Hi, I'm Dominic O'Connell, business columnist at The Times and business presenter at Times Radio.
And I'm Hannah Previtt, associate business editor at The Sunday Times. It's great to have you with us today here on The Business.
Today, we're going to give you the inside story on the creation of a unicorn, not a mythical creature, but a British business unicorn.
A homegrown success story. We're talking to the founder of Quantexa, Vishal Marria. His company reached a valuation of more than £2 billion this year, meaning that in less than a decade, he went from a bootstrapped launch to that lofty unicorn status.
How did he do it? He's going to talk us through it today. So the business of today is, well, our business is unicorns. Unicorns, there are 41 of these wild beasts roaming around in the wild in the UK, but our special animal tamers have caught one and wrestled them into the studio. So we have it in captivity. Vishal Marria, chief executive of Quantexa. It is, as you just said, a UK business success story, perhaps a bit of good news, a lot of gloom, a lot of gloomy talk anyway about the state of the British economy. But Hannah, I've always slightly struggled with this concept, and not just because I don't read enough kids' books, but what is a unicorn?
So a unicorn is a business, a private company that is valued at more than $1 billion.
$1 billion, not a billion pounds.
Not £1 billion. Although most of them, I think, also reach that metric in pounds as well, it's fair to say. And of course, Quantexa far exceeds that.
And unicorns is a phrase that's been coined largely to talk about tech companies. It's kind of an expression coined in the tech boom, isn't it, really?
Yes, it is. And as you say, we have 41 of them here in the UK. And this is one area where we do really well. And of course, we were talking to Jim Ratcliffe about all of the struggles in the chemicals industry, for example. But we do really well in tech. We're doing really well in AI. And we're just kind of struggling to keep hold of that lead right now. I think after the US, we are the second greatest creator of unicorns in the world.
That's nice to know that we're good at creating mythical beasts. What? Just tell me a bit about Vishal. You know them a bit better than I do. Tell me a bit about Vishal Marria and Quantexa itself.
Yeah, so one of the things I love most about Vishal's story is that he's totally self-made, right? So we do get these entrepreneurs who come from perhaps less humble beginnings, and they go and create a fortune, but it's based on the fact that they might have some kind of family wealth. Vishal has always worked extraordinarily hard, and we're going to hear from him in just a minute. So I don't want to steal his thunder telling his kind of origin story, if you like.
And it's a tech company. What kind of tech are we talking about?
So it's AI, and he will tell us exactly how it works. And I know he's going to bring it to life with some case studies. But as far as I understand it, when he was working for EY, he was going into lots of banks. And obviously, banks have lots of data.
Sorry, I'm going to stop you there. This is EY, the accountancy and consultancy firm.
Exactly.
Formerly known as
Ernst & Young.
We can't say Ernst & Young anymore.
We
EY.
absolutely can't. EY.
Got it.
So Vishal was working there, and he was going into lots of banks, and he was finding that all of their data was very siloed. So it was really difficult to spot patterns, particularly when it came to fraudulent behaviour, because they were all siloed in different places.
Well, and banks are notorious for having very old, creaky IT systems.
Exactly. So what Quantexa does is kind of spots patterns across different areas of the bank and, spots and prevents fraudulent activity, is my interpretation of it. But we will hear more about that from Vishal very soon. From the horse's mouth, or perhaps the unicorn's mouth.
One of the other things I want to ask about, I'm sure, and he gets asked about it a lot, but we're going to ask him again, is if you're a unicorn, if you have this lofty valuation, but you're a private company, what do you do next? What's your next stage of progression? Do you try and go onto a public market and get money from shareholders, public shareholders, so join the London Stock Exchange or New York Stock Exchange, whatever? Or do you do what Jim Ratcliffe has done, who we were talking to last week, and actually keep control of the company yourself and hang on to the equity, or at least, hang on to it without listing it on the public market? And there are pros and cons for doing both things. And I'm sure we'll talk to him about that shortly.
Absolutely. And I guess the difference is really, and we talked a bit about this with the funding model with Jim Ratcliffe last week, is that once you go down the venture capital funding route, those investors will want an exit or a return on their investment at a certain stage. So there has to be some kind of, activity exit 3-5 years down the line. So I think that very much kind of guides that process and how that trajectory looks.
Always quite a difficult conversation for entrepreneurs. It's their baby. They get outside investors in, and then when they're thinking about the next stage, it may not always be them who are making that decision once I've got those outside investors in.
Absolutely. And I know one founder in particular who this was very much the case. She didn't want to sell when she did, but her investors wanted their return after 5 years, and they sold actually not to the highest bidder in that particular instance.
And also we have to talk to him about, if he is thinking about going to a public stock market, becoming a public company, everybody is now talking about AI. Is it a bubble which is about to burst? We've seen ludicrous things happening on the US stock market with the valuation of these AI companies. We really are in a completely new phase of public companies when it comes to AI. So what does he think about all that as well? And what does that say for the timing of his decision about whether to go public or not?
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to unpicking that with him too. And yeah, he's usually quite forthright in his opinion, so I'm sure he'll have plenty to say. Hi, Vishal. Thank you so much for joining us here on The Business today.
Great to be here, Hannah. Thank you.
Can we kick off with you telling us a little bit about your early life and what it was like growing up?
Oh, how early do we want to go? I'm going to go right to the beginning. As you said, early life. Makes me feel a lot older now when you say early life. So look, my parents, my dad came from India in 1961. He married my mum in 65. My mum came to the UK in 66. I was born in the early 80s. And look, from a very young age, business was a discussion that was spoken at the dinner table most nights. So I remember from the age of about 5, finishing school, going to work at my dad's cash and carry in Brixton. It was brilliant, honestly brilliant. I learned so much.
There's a big education to be had in dealing with people with cash. Yeah. And sometimes quite small amounts of cash. You learn a lot about people's nature, don't you?
Yeah, look, I think when you're in that environment of business and, as you say, small items all the way to big items, small shop versus a big shop, you learn a lot. You learn a lot about product market fit, what's working, what's not working, where you position products, how you position products. I might say something I'm a bit strange. I used to always remember packing the cases of Coke or the cases of beer, but making sure they all line up. Because presentation was really important. So I remember at a very young age, carrying a case of Coke from the pallet, putting it on the shelf and making sure it was all lined up straight. My elder brother used to do this himself incredibly well. And so I learned from him, I learned from my dad, I learned from my mum a lot. It was great, growing up with that family culture that we all went in it to do this together and win together. It was great. And that was from a really early age, Hannah. And I remember many fond days, many hard days. When you are young and you're packing shelves or you're serving customers, your hand gets quite dark quite quickly because of all the dirt on a case and you're putting it up. So, you used to judge work by how dirty your hands were at the end of the day.
Looking at your hands now, they're definitely not dirty anymore.
Different type of work now.
You went on to study computer sciences, didn't you? So how did that transition from kind of the retail kind of customer facing world then translate to computer sciences?
So deep down inside, I, from a very young age, loved computers, breaking them, bringing them together, getting it to do things, writing programs. I remember I went to this amazing school in Balham, Chestnut Grove, where at that time it was a really interesting place to be when you're studying and you're growing up, but you learned a lot of lessons. And at school, we had information technology was the GCSE, I think it was, IT. And I remember, learning about learning about, how do you make a computer do things, even if it's hello world on your screen. That was pretty cool at that time. So I really enjoyed that. And that kind of stayed with me at A levels. And then it was kind of a logical path going into my degree. So I went to Royal Holloway University of London out in Egham, and I really enjoyed my degree. I got a first class with honours in computer science, and I was learning about machine learning, deep learning, Kahuna networks, advanced analytics from a really, really great time at uni. And then my master's was in information business systems. So it's taking what I had done in sort of deep tech, but bringing it into the business, which was also great. And I got a distinction in my master's.
Did your family, I mean, you talked about your family being involved in the business together. What did your family want you to do? Were they happy with you doing computer sciences, or if it led to a profession or something, or what did they want you to do?
That's a deep question, Deborah. So in honest truth, so my mum was a big backing for me and many of my siblings to go and get an education. Like, don't come to the cash and carry. Like, work after school or weekends, but go and get an education. And that was distilled at a very young age. Like, whatever you're doing in business, Vish, you're going to go to school, you're going to go and get your A levels, you're going to go and get your degrees, and you're going to do that. And I remember there was this point, should I do my master's or not? And my mum was quite adamant, you're going to go and do your master's. And, you know, being a very obedient son, I went, yes, mum, I'm going to do that. But then it became interesting, right? Is when I graduated with my master's, and my parents, in particular my dad, said to me, okay, you're going to come to and do the family stuff now. And I was very adamant not to. And I said to my dad, and my mum and dad always backed my decision. It was never like a heated conversation, but dad was like, okay, you're going to come and do the family stuff. And I went, no, I've studied all this way. And I want to go into a career which is reflecting what I've learned and studied, and, you know, did the late nights in the Talansky lab at Royal Holloway. I want to go and do something related to my field. And so I got a grad program at Detica at that time. It was a public listed company here in the UK, which subsequently got acquired by BAE Systems. So I became a graduate as part of their Data Lab Academy. And I remember my dad saying to me, I'll give you 6 months. And then you're going to come back to the family, which again was really nice to hear that he had that much faith in my 6 months at going to Detica. But you know, I was there for over 7 years. I had, I think it was 5 or 6 back-to-back promotions. I was the quickest to director in Detica, and I had a great time there, and I learned a lot.
But people forget a bit about Detica now because it was part of BAE, but it was a really hot cybersecurity company back in the day, wasn't it? People talked a lot about it.
Yeah, at Detica, my paths crossed with a person that's been really, really impactful to my career, a person called Imam Hock. Imam's one of my co-founders at Quantexa, and Imam and I met in 2005, and at that time he was on the board. And I remember this, and I speak fondly about this experience with my wife. I had a meeting with Imam, and I remember coming home, and I sent a message to my wife, and I said, I had this meeting today. It was with a board member. His name's Imam Hock. Oh my God! ! And again, fantastic individual. Those were some incredible days, and the lift from going from academia to joining Detica and not going back to the family and when working with the family was a big step.
What was it specifically about that meeting with Imam that made you go, oh my God?
For me, it was kind of the reason why I joined sort of a professional environment, is learning from experts. What Imam is and was then as well was a big SME, a big subject matter expert. And, you know, that expertise around data and what we call now big data, big analytics, AI, machine learning, Imam was an expert. And I remember the meeting, we were working with a client, and another thing I loved about that meeting, and something's true to my DNA, is meritocracy. Imam was so amazing and say, look, if you're good enough, we're going to give you more responsibility and more accountability. And that's something I've done to people. But one thing I learned from that meeting is how he conducted himself with a graduate. He took the time out to spend time with a graduate, 3 months out of university on a very critical project, and he spent time with me. And that was pretty awesome. But I will say his expertise and the way he articulated quite a complex problem in sort of plain English was amazing.
And so what happened next?
I was headhunted. It's a really interesting story. So I was doing a partnership with EY, and at that time I was at a company called SAS, and I went what I thought was a partnership dinner with a tremendous partner at EY. At that time, he was leading all of technology consulting for EY, and I thought it was a very innocent partnership dinner. And we went to this lovely Japanese restaurant in London, and the gentleman's called Dan Higgins. He's my chief product officer here at Quantexa today. And Dan and I went out for dinner, and we started talking about the partnership. And then he went, "Look, Vish, I didn't call you for the partnership." And I was like, "The partnership meeting?" I go, "Okay, this is a very awkward moment now. Why are we having supper tonight?" And then he goes, "Look, I want you to be the next partner at EY. Come and join the firm." And you kind of take a step back and you go, wow, I will be the youngest in the firm at this grade. And then after, I think it was about 12 interviews in 2 weeks. It was not little. And you're at this period when people leave a firm to go to another firm, you feel like you're cheating on your existing firm. So you got to be really like, your headspace is quite weird, and you're kind of going through this thing. Do I really want to join the firm, and do I want to leave the people that I've worked with for so many years? I was going through, it's quite emotional as well. But when I joined EY, it was the best step I made in my career. A great firm, and all Big Four are great firms. And it was incredible for me as it rounded out Vishal. It rounded me out.
Because you deal with lots of smart people like you who in the firm, and also you have to work for a range of different clients.
Spot on. So I think I've been quite fortunate that I've always worked with incredibly smart people. But at EY, you're absolutely right. The caliber of people you're working with, but like you say, Dominic, the sessions and the meetings and the thought process of working with large banks on the client side. So, many of these times as a vendor, sometimes you're on this side of the fence. So you don't really get to see what's happening in the actual bank or in the actual government that you're supporting, because you're kind of on this side. But when you join a firm like EY, you're actually on the client side. So you're seeing the mechanics of a very large business, how it works, what happens when a tech firm comes and pitches, what happens after the pitch. That was great experience.
And so that experience at EY was what ultimately gave you the idea for Quantexa, wasn't it?
Absolutely. So, when I was at the firm, one of the clients we were quite engaged with, and I was personally quite engaged with, was with HSBC. Whilst I was there, I saw a common thread, a common issue, which was many of these organizations had siloed data right across their enterprise. It could be customer data, transactions, payments. It could be external information that they had captured. And this could be broken up into different divisions. So the private bank versus the retail bank versus the wholesale bank. And then you have silos within those banks. Now, what people wanted to do was to fundamentally make a better decision in areas like, are you a good person? Do we want to do more business with you? Do we want to onboard you quicker, faster, more cheap? Because you're a good person, right? And we want to get this in. Alternatively, if you're a high risk client, they want to understand if you are high risk, how do we manage that relationship out? How do we manage that relationship full stop? And to do that, many of these organizations had to connect this data together. Knowing that Vishal Marria is a private wealth client, knowing that he's the director of a company, and if you kept that in silo, then you're making a decision on Vish in private bank and Vish as the director of an entity here in isolation. Therefore, you're not making a very good decision. So in this particular case, we were working with the bank to look at areas around financial crime, anti-money laundering, and so on. And doing this in isolation was hugely ineffective and hugely inefficient. So we looked in the market, could anyone sort of bring this data together in a transparent, at scale, allow it to serve multiple use cases within the organization? And what I saw was no one was doing this. So basically my hypothesis was back in 2015 was that if I could turn this problem upside down, if I could connect data at scale, both internal as well as external to the organization, and then use this connected view of data and push it into AI, surely you will make better decisions, but better efficiencies on those decisions than doing it in isolation. So I resigned from the firm. It was a big moment. And, I had to resign to the individual that hired me, which was also quite painful.
What did your dad say?
What did my dad say? About time. Honestly,
Oh, really?
It was about time. But he was about third or fourth conversation. My first conversation was actually my wife. And all big decisions, I will do it hand in hand with my wife, because these are big decisions. When I resigned from the firm, we were earning very well, a great role, great, is a great job for the future, blah, blah, blah. And, I went 2.5/3 years, no salary at Quantexa, right? So this was a big decision. I was over £1 million down of my own money in Quantexa. So I was all in, like in the poker game, like all chips are in. I was all in on Q. So this was a big decision. And so my first convo was with my wife. And the second convo was with the firm.
So you had this idea, you knew what you were going to do. It was to connect all this data, all this disparate data inside the bank and meld it with stuff outside, feed it into AI and make some decent decisions on the back of that. That sounds very easy to explain when you're sitting there in concept. I think a lot of people want to know, okay, so how do you go about putting that into action? Who wrote that software for you, or did you write it yourself?
So in all forms of business, it's always about people. Always. So when I decided, that's it, I'm going to start a business, the first thing I did was talk to trusted people who I know that can help me on the journey, who I know that can lead this journey with me. And so I called straight away Imam, who had worked with me. He was my boss's boss at BAE and so on. But I also called a number of other people. One of those people is my CTO, one of the co-founders, a lovely guy called Jamie Hutton. And Jamie and his team wrote the Quantexa platform. We were about 18 months old as a business, and we were bidding for a very large contract with a very large bank, where I was toe to toe with some of the biggest tech companies around the world. And we won. We won that RFP. We deployed, and that's been a deployment since 2017 and is still there today.
And obviously people is one ingredient, if you like, when you're building a unicorn, but another very important ingredient is capital. So how early in the journey were you thinking you wanted to be a unicorn, if that was even a thing? Was it kind of the vision? And how early did you take capital, and how did you choose your investors?
Firstly, in any time we've done a raise, I've never been fixated about the number. Honestly, if you get fixated on the number, you will be optimizing for the wrong things. When I started Q, I wanted to prove to the world that here in the UK, we can build foundational technology. Period. We have here in the UK some of the smartest people, some of the smartest universities. We have a diverse group of people that brings so much knowledge and wisdom, if it's around science, if it's around technologies, whatever it is. And, it pained me. There wasn't more happening here in the UK around tech, data, AI. And, this country has given me, my family, so much. My dad came to the UK with 1 shilling in his pocket. 1 shilling, proper old money, right? But coming back to your question, I never went out to any raise to say, I want to get X. I never...
By raise, you mean fundraise?
Sorry, fundraise, sorry. When we went to do a fundraise, I never said, I want to get X. I want to be valued at Y, or whatever it was. The mission of Q was to connect data together, to build foundational technology here in the UK. And that's what we want to do, and that's what we're doing. Now, your second part of the question, when did we decide? So obviously we're bankrolling it. A lot of my money is in the company, and you're not earning a salary, still got a mortgage to pay, still got bills. You still want to go out to a restaurant now and then with your wife, especially when you're in trouble like I am many times, working or whatnot. But The bit that clicked was the point when that tender we were doing, and I was seeing from the client that the market fit is happening. This is not just a solution looking for a problem. There is a big problem here. Doing this on a shoestring where I'm hand to mouth every 3 or 4 months, looking over the shoulder, say, do I have enough money for the payroll in 5 months, is not the right thing to lead a foundational business. So at that point, I said to my team, we're going to have to go and raise money. Are we all in? And straight away, the whole team was like, we're going to go and do this. So 3 months process. I ran it like an RFP, like a request for proposal. I went to market, spoke to 20 potential investors, and I ran it like a process. And I said, look, by Friday the 13th, and it was a Friday the 13th in December, term sheets in. We received not 1, not 2, but 5 term sheets that night. 5. And look, there is no raise, there is no fundraise, there is no valuation till you get a term sheet. You can have thousands of great conversations with thousands of investors. It means nothing until you get a term sheet. And so that Friday the 13th, we got the 5. And then that weekend, Imam and I came back into the office and we spent 2 days evaluating each term sheet. What's more than the money that those investors were bringing, future growth, partnership, etc. And then we selected.
So what's next on the Quantexa journey? I know there's been lots of coverage in the press about a potential listing, whether you're going to look at doing that here in London or in New York. What can you share with us on that, Vishal?
I think I get asked this question. I get it asked a lot.
Are you accusing me of not being original?
No, not at all. But you phrase it a lot better. So I think everyone is fixated that the event is the final destination. No way. No way. Right? We are building a big business and it excites me so much. So, for us and for me in particular, continue growing our business is critical. We're growing at 40+% year on year. The business last year, this time, is very different to today. And the business in 12 months' time today is going to be very different. And one thing I really love about this is how you have to continue to reinvent yourself. I've reinvented myself probably about 6 times in the last 9 years. The Vish that took Quantexa from 0 to 1 million is very different between 1 and 10. Very different between 10 and 50.
So we won't call it a float or a listing. It's an event from now on. When the event happens, is it important for you to retain control?
I'm not a control freak, right?
Is it important for you to retain control?
I'm not a control freak. No, what's important for me, right? When I started Q, the North Star was to become the leader in decision intelligence, right? My focus is to get Quantexa there. How we get there is a different question. Where we're going is leadership. How we get there is a different question. So does that mean going public or staying private? Does that mean we acquire more businesses to become there quicker, faster, cheaper? These are all great decisions. And we should not get hung up on ownership structure versus the vision and the mission of what Quantexa is going to do.
And you've talked about how much you love London, right? You were born and raised here. So if you chose not to list in the UK, that would be a bit of a kick in the teeth for, the London stock market. And also, I have it on very good information that the NASDAQ is trying to woo lots of our British founders by sending them birthday cakes. I know it's your birthday this month. So have any birthday cakes arrived in the post for you?
So look, we have lots of conversations with lots of exchanges. So, all options are on the table. And I think I've said that probably about 20 times. All options are on the table. But, cool. You're going to say something? No. The point about London, right? Look, London's my home. I was born and brought up here. It's a great city. Yes, as a Brit and as all Brits, we can be so negative about the UK. It's kind of like how we are. But there are so many great things about this country and about this city.
We all love London, but I'm sure your bankers are telling you now, if you don't float in the States, you're nuts. The valuation you'll get in the States will be, what, twice what you get in the UK maybe? It depends. But, money talks.
That's a great saying on Money Talks. I'll come on to another phrase around Money Talks. But money talks if the IPO was the final destination. I have to run this business after the IPO. Yeah, we ring the bell or we press the clock in LSEG. They should probably put a bell. I have made a recommendation at least twice now.
It's really flat, isn't it?
We should put a bell. Come on. But you got to come back to the point I raised earlier. What gets me and Quantexa to leadership position in decision intelligence? Staying private, go public. Go public, London or New York. And that's the analysis we're doing. Yes, money is a factor for the shareholders, but I'm accountable to the shareholders, but my people, my customers, my partners, I'm accountable to all. So I will always do the right thing for Q. Always.
Vishal, it's clearly a great British success story, right? And you spoke really passionately earlier about the fact that you would love to see more foundational technology businesses built here in London. Just a few kind of final thoughts, perhaps, on how we build more great unicorns like Quantexa here in London.
So there are many parts to this, right? So things that, government can be supporting on, things around culture, things around, entrepreneurship and supporting entrepreneurship, innovation hubs through, sometimes the regulator or, organizations to back this, university hubs and innovation hubs at university. There are lots of things. But I'm going to go into one of those things that I mentioned, which is culture. There were hundreds of reasons why I shouldn't have started Quantexa. When I was at EY, hundreds of reasons. What are you doing, Vish? Stay at the firm. It's a great firm. You're doing so well. You're the youngest partner. Stay. You've got all of this great clients you're working with, and they were great clients. But I had to do this. Inside, I knew that if I didn't do this now, I don't think I'm going to do it again. So it did push me, the fact that I had seen business from a young age. It did push me when I saw the opportunity. But culturally, inside, taking that risk, this is not something that everyone will do. And take that risk, I struggle sometimes explaining it. It sometimes is inside of you to take the risk. If you see it, and that doesn't mean you take any risk. If you keep crossing the road blindly, you're going to get hit by a car one day, right? So I'm not saying take that risk, right? But what I am saying, if you back something and you do all your homework and you calculate it and you can then go and follow your idea, follow your dream. When I speak to young entrepreneurs or even older entrepreneurs than I am, and they're doing this, I love those conversations. I spoke to someone last week. They just sold their company, did a great job. And, he's asking me, would I consider backing him on a separate company? And I think entrepreneurs who are doing that and then they can reinvest their money back in ecosystem, I think it's a great idea. We need that fueling the next generation. And it's not just the money, it's the experience, the wisdom. What did you do when you got to this junction in your journey? What did you do? Because as a CEO and founder, it's a great position for sure, but it's one of the loneliest positions in the entire company is my seat.
We've been far too abusive of your time, Vishal. But listen, thank you very much for being the second ever guest on our podcast.
Hopefully not the last.
Hopefully not the last. No.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much, Vishal.
Well, I very much enjoyed talking to Vishal, a lovely guy, and loves all lands and all peoples, as he told us. But I'm sure the reality, particularly around considering what that next event, as he called it, is a bit more gritty. He'll have bankers in his ear saying, listen, you got to go to New York. He'll have the London Stock Exchange in his ear saying, please stay here, list here. And he gave a bit of a hint that he might be looking towards London, I thought, maybe. But also, he must be thinking about the timing of all this. AI valuations are sky high. The Bank of England is warning about it. So if you are going to have an event, maybe this is the time to do it.
Yeah. I mean, as you say, I don't think there was any Sunday Times exclusive reveal for us in this conversation today. But I really I do think it was quite rousing what he had to say about the benefits of being based here in London, all the things that we have going for us. You know, I loved the theme of kind of needing to take more risk. I thought that was really interesting. And it actually chimed also with our interview with Jim Ratcliffe last week. And that's the one thing that they do have in common. Very different industries, but both keen on taking big risks.
And I thought really interesting how in the case of his family, it was inculcated from an early age. So he always had that idea. Well, he didn't quite say it like this. I'm going to be my own boss and I'm going to make my own business. And I think that's what came out eventually when he left EY.
Yeah. Yeah, no, a really great chat, great guy. I think we could do with more entrepreneurs like him here in Britain.
Yeah, and I wait to see what he's going to do around this event.
Indeed. Well, hopefully he'll come back and tell us all about it very soon.
Just the wrap, yeah?
Yeah.
I'm Dominic O'Connell.
I'm Hannah Previtt.
And this is The Business. Thank you very much for being with us. We would both love to hear about your thoughts on the show and the themes we're looking at. Suggest some more subjects, perhaps. You can email us at thebusiness@thetimes.com. Tell us what you think and what you want us to cover.
And if you're listening to us right now, remember you can also catch this show on YouTube.
Yes, we were speaking to Vishal today, but last week we spoke to a very different businessman, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, co-owner of Man U, of course, and Ineos. The full video of my interview with him is there for you if you want to hear more on YouTube, that is. And please do subscribe to this podcast. It's there on YouTube or on your podcast app.
And we'll be back with you next week. So bye-bye until then.
Bye.